You're watching Tag TV. I'm your host, Tahir Gora. Today I'm joined with Honorable Michael Chong, MP for Wellington Halton Hills. Mr. Chong is very dynamic and vibrant Member Parliament of Canada. He's also a candidate for Conservative Party leadership race. Welcome, Mr. Chong.
Thanks for having me.
Has your political dimension changed since you have entered into leadership race?
It has. We've been reaching out to people and telling our story. You know, I'm the kid of immigrant parents, so I've been talking a lot about who I am. A lot of people don't know me that well, and so I've taken the last couple of months since entering this leadership race to introduce myself to Canadians. And so I've been telling my story, which is the story of millions of Canadians who've come here in recent decades. It's a story of immigration. My father was a Chinese immigrant. He came here in 1952 from Hong Kong. And my mother was a Dutch immigrant, and she came from Western Europe in the 1960s. And they both came here separately. They met here, got married, and I'm one of their four children. And that to me is a real Canadian story.
Absolutely amazing. And Canada is all about people from all over the world. But we do have our common values based on humanity, based on human rights. And personally, I feel offended when someone says Western values. No, we have human values. Mm-hmm. And Canada is blessed with all those human values, human rights. Mm-hmm. So what is your message in terms of new Canadians who are becoming Canadians now?
Well, my message is that this is the greatest country in the world. This country is made up of Aboriginal peoples, but peoples also who have come here from all around the world. From the far corners of the earth to build for themselves and their family a new life of hope and opportunity. And as Canadians, we do share something in common. We have in common as Canadians our citizenship and the values and responsibilities, the beliefs, the rights and responsibilities that citizenship is based on. So we all share in common as Canadians, regardless of where we've come from or how long our ancestors have been here, a common set of rights and responsibilities that are enshrined in our common law jurisprudence, that are enshrined in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that are enshrined in other pieces of law. And so we should celebrate the fact that we're not just a bunch of different groups with nothing in common. We're all Canadians, and I think too often we emphasize our differences rather than what we have in common.
Absolutely. Where would you take Conservative Party if you get elected as the leader of the party?
Well, quite simply, if I'm leader of the party, we're going to work hard to expand our support, to bring in new people into our party, and to re-earn the trust of Canadians in the next election. And I think we do that by doing two things. I think Conservatives need to elect a new generation of leadership to the party, not just a new leader of the party, but we need to recruit a diverse field of candidates to run for us in yet unheld ridings in the country's largest cities. I tell people that in the last election, we failed to win any seats in the following cities: Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Halifax, Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph, Mississauga, Oakville, Vaughan, and I could go on. You get the picture. We need to recruit a diverse set of candidates, a new generation of Conservatives who reflect the diversity of this country, that will run for us in these cities and win us seats in the next election. I think the second thing we need to do is we need to come forward with a fiscally conservative agenda that appeals to the broad majority of Canadians, an agenda based on lower taxes, balanced budgets, expanded trade, and the efficient delivery of government services. But I think we also need to change our position on certain issues. I think on the environment, Conservatives need to change our position on the pricing of carbon. I think we need to acknowledge that the price of carbon has arrived in Canada, and that we as Conservatives need to have a position on this topic. My view is that any revenues generated by carbon should be used to cut income taxes. I think the other area where we need to change is on the whole issue of democracy and how we conduct ourselves both as a party and in government. I think we need to be a lot more open and transparent as to how we run ourselves as a party, but also how we conduct ourselves in government.
Since political pundits think that Liberal government would stay in power for another term at least, what would be your plans to strengthen your party and defeat Liberals in next election?
Well, I tell people in 2012 when Mr. Trudeau became leader of the Liberal Party, nobody would have predicted that he would have won a majority government in the 2015 election some 3.5 years later? Well, he did. And so the same people that are predicting that we cannot win in 2019, to me, reflect the same kind of thinking that surrounded Mr. Trudeau when he first won the leadership in 2012. Conservatives can win in 2019. It's not going to be easy, but if we reach out by recruiting a new diverse set of candidates, elect a new generation of leadership to the party, and present policies that appeal to Canadians, like creating jobs and keeping taxes low, I think we can win the 2019 election.
Some critics also think that prevailing political correctness within political parties is preventing political parties to act and behave on principles. In your opinion, what is the situation with Conservative Party, and how do you strategize to save your party from unnecessary political correctness?
Well, I think we have to be frank about what our values are, as not just as Conservatives, but as Canadians. Our values were hard fought for and hard won. They didn't come about easily, whether it was giving women the right to vote and enshrining gender equality in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, whether it was ensuring that people would not be discriminated against on the basis of their religion, race, or creed, whether it was ensuring that we live in a society where we have freedom of expression. These are all fundamental values on which we're based, and we need to constantly be reminded that these values didn't come easily. These freedoms weren't won easily. They were hard fought for, and we have to continually stand up for them and defend them, including the freedom to express oneself in this country. I think too often people shut down the debate by shouting it down rather than by using reasoned argument, and we always have to guard against that tendency.
Some critics also think that all political parties, including Conservative Party, are more focused on their ethnic vote banks and fundraising rather than political vision. What's your take on that?
Well, I think all parties today are realize that a significant number of voters come from various ethnocultural communities across Canada. We have to reach out to those communities. They're underrepresented in general. They're underrepresented in our House of Commons and in our public institutions. And so I think it's a good thing that parties are reaching out to different groups of minorities, because they need to be reflected in our House of Commons. They need to run as candidates for political parties, and their voice needs to be fully heard. But for me, as somebody who is the kid of immigrant parents, as somebody who's a visible minority, I've always felt that simply reaching out to new groups of voters, to new Canadians, in itself isn't enough. It also has to come in parallel with real action that will ensure that these underrepresented groups are fully represented in our political system. And so that, to me, is the other side of the coin. Yes, we have to reach out and attend events and reach out to leaders in the various communities and to people in those communities, but it also has to result in real action to ensure that the public service, our House of Commons, and our other public institutions reflect the diversity of this country.
Well, that's absolutely a great gesture. But on the other hand, we observe that sometimes people get elected from different ethnic communities. Mm-hmm. They do not behave like Member Parliament of Canada. Sometimes it appears that they are representing just their community, not even their riding. They are just representing their back home, mm-hmm. not the Canadian values. Do you experience some sort of this?
Yeah, I think that there's a tendency in some parts of the country for that to happen. I've always felt that we should be colorblind.
Absolutely.
In that it doesn't matter what your background or origin or last name is, that you should be able to represent any riding in this country based on your ability to do the job. And so for me, having I've always said this, having somebody like a John McCallum represent a riding that is overwhelmingly Asian is as refreshing as somebody with the last name like me, with the last name of Chong, representing a riding that's overwhelmingly Caucasian. I think that's the future of the country, where people don't see the color of the other person or the ethnic background of the other person, but judge them on their ability to do the job. That, to me, is the future of the country. We can't hive ourselves off into different groups. I completely disagree with the current Prime Minister on this. He said in the New York Times shortly after the election that Canada is the first post-national state, that Canada has no identity, and Canada is simply a collection of different groups. Well, I couldn't disagree more. As somebody whose parents were immigrants to this country, one from Asia, one from Europe, Canada does have an identity. Canada does have an identity based on our common citizenship, based on common sets of rights and responsibilities that unite us all. It's the reason why my parents came to this country, and it's the reason why I'm in politics, because we have to continue to fight for these values to ensure that they're passed on to our children and grandchildren.
Since many European countries, including France and England, have emerged with their ethnic ghettos now, how could Canadian political parties prevent Canada from the threat or potential threats of ghettoization here in Canada?
Well, I think it's a bit of two things. I think first we have to ensure that our public institutions are inclusive. So currently the House of Commons has some 13% of its MPs as members of visible minority groups, when their numbers are almost double in the population. So clearly political parties and political leaders have to do a better job in recruiting candidates to run for us in the next election. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in this leadership race. As I said to dozens of people that I'm recruiting to run for us in the next election, it's not just about electing a new leader, it's also about my campaign, my leadership campaign is also about recruiting a new generation of candidates to run for us from diverse communities and yet unheld ridings. So I think we need to do a better job of ensuring that our House of Commons, our federal public service, our military, and all of our federal public institutions reflect the diversity of this country today. I think that's one critical component, so that people across the country, regardless of where they're from, look at their public institutions and see themselves in that. I think the second thing we need to do is we need to make it clear, as Minister Kenny did when he was Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, that when you come to this country, there are common values, common rights, and common responsibilities that we as Canadians all adhere to. Some of them are enshrined in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, some in other pieces of legislation, and some in the practices that we have. And I think it's clear that we as political leaders communicate that to Canadians, newly arrived Canadians and those who have been here much longer, and say, look, we're not just a collection of different groups with nothing in common. We do have something in common, and here's what we believe in.
In the end, I would like to know your special message as a candidate of Conservative Party leadership race, and also a message to our fellow Canadians as a seasoned politician, seasoned young politician, I would say. So we would appreciate your messages in that.
Well, quite simply, I'm running for the leadership of the Conservative Party because I believe in this country. This country has given me and my family everything, and I think the same is true of millions of Canadians who've come here in recent decades. My wife's family has been here since the 1830s. They immigrated from Scotland on a boat in the 1830s. So she represents the other side of the Canadian story. And so my children today are of Chinese, Dutch, English, Scottish, and Irish origin, but the only way to describe them is Canadian. And that's the future of the country, and that's the kind of country that we all have to build together. And that's the reason why I'm in this leadership race, because I believe that if we can harness the energy and the ambition of new Canadians, if we can harness that along with the traditions and the institutions that generations who've been here before us have built for us, that the future of this country is looking very bright indeed. And I hope to capture that ambition and that energy and use that in our institutions like the House of Commons and in Parliament to take this country to the next level.
And the future of Conservative Party under your leadership? Well,
it would be a much more open and transparent party where we bring in many more people to our party from a wide variety of groups, a party where we articulate a clear set of principles on which we're based, fiscal conservatism, about being smart with taxpayers' money, balancing our budget, keeping taxes low, a Conservative Party that is greener on the environment and that has better policies than do the other parties on environmental issues, and a party that's much more open and transparent about our House of Commons, about our government, and that is really the party for younger people to join who see themselves in our party as the vehicle for their beliefs, their hopes, and their dreams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chong.
Okay.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
Great talking to you too.
Thank you. And
you.
thank you, viewers, watching for our show. See you next time.
#1 multicultural channel. This is TAG TV.